Again, like, what is extraordinary or transformative or generational about using old ideas and just pitching them as something new?
Well,
Hey, guess what? It's Monday. It's wild. That means we're about a week removed from everything that happened last week on Tuesday. Everything that just kind of just like boom, boom, just smash your phone screens, your TVs, whatever you be watching, everything on was just inundated with information that really wasn't anything to do with the budget. Everything that had to do with drama in Ottawa. This MP hates that MP. This MP pushed door. That MP had hurt feelings. This MP, his assistant said, what's going on? Wait, so that's not what happened. There was a lot of drama over the weekend that had everything to do with the drama. High school never ends, baby. And that's exactly what we witnessed last week. They want you focused on anything that isn't this horrendous budget. But guess what? We are going to be doing that job for you today. Well, first off, we had Sean Fraser jump on Vashti's show yesterday trying to defend this budget. Trying his best to be like, it's the best thing in the generation that anyone has ever seen. You should feel more Canadian. This is the best we've seen since the Great World War. Don't you feel Canadian? I'm wearing a poppy. Don't you feel Canadian? That's what we got from Sean Fraser. And Vashti was like, okay, I'm not letting you kind of roll with this. We got to talk about some stuff here, and kept pressing and pressing. Man, he got uncomfortable. So we'll be covering that. But then number two, as well as we saw the jobs report come out, 67,000 new jobs added to the Canadian economy. Dude, we are doing awesome. Mark Carney is electric. We're going to be diving into that report, and well, it may not be as what it seems as per usual. We'll be getting into this and so much more. Welcome to the LV Podcast. I'm your host, Josh. If you get any value from today's episode, take the time to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us to grow. It helps us to get to new audiences, and it helps people see that there was something different than what the mainstream media has to offer. And now let's get our first story, shall we? Vashti was interviewing Mr. Sean Fraser yesterday about this budget, and she hits him, flames him with some questions. I mean, like, yeah, this is what Canadians actually want to know. And this is one thing I really loved about this interview, is Vashti was actually asking the questions that literally Canadians want to know. People want to be able to afford their homes. They want to be able to afford to feed themselves. They want to be able to afford to clothe themselves. How does this budget help with that? We're not seeing it. And she puts the pressure on Sean Fraser. So we're watching the question, watching the answer of the first 30 to 45 seconds, and we'll kind of go from there because, well, of course, like anybody that's in a governing party, but especially with this Liberal government, they're very long-winded to sound like they're more intelligent and sound they're of more depth than they really are. So that's what we'll be watching here.
In advance of the budget, your government billed it as, quote, transformational, generational, and a sea change. The increase in capital spending, for example, beyond what was already promised, only amounts to about 0.2% of GDP. And the savings, on the other hand, are only at a level about 1/3 of the scope of what the 1995 budget brought in, which was heralded at the time for its work on that side of the ledger. How does any of that, Minister, amount to a sea change?
Well, you got to look at what options the government could have considered when you're trying to achieve savings so you can make bigger investments to help grow the economy. We certainly could have taken the approach that was taken in the mid-90s, but that would have required us to slash transfers for things like health care to the provinces. We instead have made a decision.
Sorry to break it to you, Sean Fraser. You already wiped out the transfers to the provinces based on simply the fact that the interest we're paying on the debt that you helped accumulate is actually more than health transfers. So it actually renders it null. But continue.
To invest more, including in provincial healthcare infrastructure with this budget. What we wanted to do was focus on the programs that we observed not to be having their intended impact. Each of us in Cabinet was asked to go through an exercise to assess which programs, which policies were costing taxpayers money, but not delivering the outcomes that we wanted to see.
Really? Did you? Because there's a couple programs I can think of that aren't really delivering right now, and you would never touch those. One of which being the school lunch program that isn't delivering results, but is bleeding money by the day. That could have been one. No. Guess what it was? No, they wanted to axe the tax on jets and yachts. That's what they thought was, these are expensive programs we need to cut. But anyways, continue.
Those programs will be phased out, some through organic sunsetting periods. There'll be some attrition, some early retirements offered to folks in the public service. But what it's done is it has freed up capital that allow us to make investments that are going to help grow the economy. Investment tax credits for those who are going to bring a business to Canada. Tax deductions for those who are going to buy a new piece of equipment to scale up. Investments in infrastructure where they're going to put people to work in the short term, but create a stronger economy in the long term. The impact that this budget is going to have over the next decade or number of decades is extraordinary when you look at the opportunity to build the kind of economy that will generate productivity and revenue for generations to come.
Minister.
So there it is, right? Let's fluff it all up. Look at everything that's going on. It's great. It's a really thoughtful. Look at all the things we've done to bring this to fruition. It's going to be amazing. And, well, God bless Vashti. She doesn't buy it.
Productivity and revenue for generations to come.
Minister, I'll put to you again, though. What exactly is extraordinary about using infrastructure spending to stimulate the economy, about taking tax write-offs to incentivize business investment? Both of those things I can remember former Prime Minister Stephen Harper introducing, and as recently as 2018.
You cannot simply utter the man who should not be named to a Liberal, Stephen Harper. Wait a second, is Mark Carney copying Stephen Harper's policies and claiming them as something new, something fresh, something that everyone should understand and really appreciate? It's not the first time Mark Carney's done that, has he? Remember the time where he took credit for the 2008 crisis and how Canada got through it when he had literally nothing to do with it? Oh, yeah, I remember that one. Okay, but yeah, continue, sorry.
The Trudeau government, of which you were a prominent member, also introduced the ability to write off different pieces of equipment that was actually broader in scope and more immediate than what you are pitching. So again, what is extraordinary or transformative or generational about using old ideas and just pitching them as something new?
Well, I would disagree that these are simply old ideas being pitched as something new. You can look, for example, not only to the fact that you might be using a tool that certainly has existed before with investment tax credits, but using it to tap into new and emerging sectors in the economy, whether that's critical minerals, whether that's adopting sovereign infrastructure when it comes to AI, to ensure as the trade disruptions that we've seen globally have an impact on our ability to control our economy, to control the data that helps power the economy. We're not just putting more money into things, but ensuring that it builds a level of sovereignty to the economic decision.
But you're literally not offering anything new. You're offering tax incentives. There's nothing transformational about this. You're doing what any government should be doing in the first place. But secondly, you're doing things that a government's done previously, and you're doing a worse version of it. What do we talk? This is what I'm talking about, right? When we start reading and start watching some of these interviews and the fluff that gets thrown out there, you cannot simply headline read. You cannot simply just go off of whatever they're saying. There is actually depth and a story behind whatever it is they're alluding to that simply is they're giving a half, quarter, maybe 5% truths in order to seem like they are something that they are simply not. He continues on saying what he's saying here, and Vashti continues to press him again. Watch this. I'll fast forward.
I certainly do take your point on defense spending because it is markedly more significant than anything we've seen previously. If I put that aside, though, and look at all the other things you're announcing that you say will have a material impact, really, I guess, 5 years out or more on Canadians' lives, don't take my word for it. I look at the analysis from Desjardins, which said if Canadians were hoping for a transformative or generational budget, they will be disappointed with the Government of Canada's budget 2025. The Bank of Montreal, much of the stimulus in the budget consists of measures that were already known, so it is unlikely to cause a sharp revision of economic growth forecasts. The pitch from your government is what we're doing here is so unique, you are going to see the economy grow in ways that you haven't before. The Bank of Montreal is saying we're not even going to revise our forecast based on what we saw in this budget.
The private sector's saying what they're saying at this point in time. There is nothing new or transformational about this budget. You are saying one thing and doing another, and we're not even so much as going to bother changing our forecast on what we're going to see with the economy, what we're going to see with interest rates, bond yields, so on and so forth, because there's nothing that has moved the needle with this budget. Of course, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. However, it's nice to see liberals on the mainstream media taken to task on essentially the lies that they are spreading and the misinformation they continue to push to distract and lie to you about what's happening. Because quite frankly, as we saw over the weekend, we saw this story pop up. Canada gains a surprise 67,000 jobs in October, beating economists' expectations. Yes, I guess so, may have. 67,000 jobs. Well, we had to take a look at the report. There's some things to really think about. There's some things to really address with this report that, of course, isn't going to be on a headline. However, we know with the manipulation tactics that take place, we know that majority of people just do that. They headline read. So they see this and they say, wow, 67,000 jobs in October. That's pretty good. Mark Carney's on the right track. And again, this is being pushed to the types of people who are feeling the pinch, but not feeling it enough yet to want to change who they vote for. So in their world, they live in their bubble and they see this like, okay, well, people who are not as well off are now going to start getting jobs. That's good, man. We're seeing things move forward. Are we? The question is, are we? Well, let's pull up the jobs report, shall we? So as it says, employment increased by 67,000 jobs in October, the second consecutive monthly increase, and the employment rate rose by 0.2 percentage points to 60.8%. The unemployment rate declined by 0.2 percentage points to 6.9%. Still terrible. 7.1% actually was 7.1% was the matching the high since May 2016. So it went down, but yeah, it's looking good though, guys. It's looking good. But let's look at some numbers that are a little more, I don't know, real, and some things to get yourself to think about. So as I said, this report says the unemployment rate fell 0.2 percentage points to 6.9% in October. Prior to this decline, the unemployment rate had reached 7.1% in August and September, the highest level since May 2016, excluding the COVID years, of course. Yes, right, we're adding jobs. Things are trending in the right direction. However, we are still only 0.2 off of some of the worst highs in close to 10 years. Okay, but let's talk about the things that really kind of move the needle, shall we? Some things that get you really thinking. Long-term unemployment. The proportion of unemployed people who had been continuously searching for work for 27 weeks or more stood at 21.3% in October. Little change from 21.2% in October of 2024, meaning nothing has changed. Hasn't gotten better, also hasn't gotten worse. But that's pretty bad. Since in a year's time, half of that year, Mark Carney's been in charge saying he's going to do things at record speeds. Things are going to change drastically with him in the House. Well, he's been in the House 6-7 months now. And the long-term unemployment number has barely changed or shifted. As I said, the unemployment rate decreases to 6.9 in October. But look at that trend, folks. Like it just bump, rising. It hit a peak of 7.1. Because it went down by 0.2%, they want you to think that things are going just swimmingly. However, let's keep in mind how many of these jobs are, part-time jobs. Many of they've announced are part-time work. So as we see here, the employment increase in October was driven by part-time work, 85,000 jobs. This follows an increase in full-time work in September. On a year-over-year basis, employment was up in both full-time and part-time work. But let's look at the numbers, shall we? Again, 67,000 is the net jobs added. 119,000 jobs were added last month. 85,000 of them were in part-time. Does that tell you that's an economy that's growing? Does that signal to you that's an economy that's healthy? Part-time jobs increasing as you go into the holiday months. Right, yeah. Adds up in my books. Yeah, it's looking great. Things are awesome. It's not like part-time work increased in springtime. It's not like full-time jobs have increased over the year. Oh, year over year, these months. It's working, it's trending. We adding full-time jobs. Yeah, how many of them are public sector? Come on. As I said, long-term unemployment 21.3%. To give you an idea, again, we saw that number at 23.4% in March of this year. To give you an idea, that is the highest it got post-2008 crisis was about 20%. To give you context, the worst it got in the 2008 crisis, it was about 2 years after the crisis, it rose to 20%. The long-term unemployment rate was actually worse in the mid-90s with the recession during that decade, which came at about 22.8%. So we saw the highest long-term unemployment rate since the mid-90s, eclipsing what we saw in 2008. And now we are just kind of hovering at 21.3%, an uptick just a bit higher than it was this time last year. But don't worry, it's coming down. It's trending down, they say. It's trending down. These are the areas that we saw increases in jobs. The top two are the most interesting to me. Wholesale and retail trade, the highest at about 40,000. Transportation and warehousing, around just over 30,000 jobs added. As I said, this time of year is going to fuel job increases, particularly in part-time. Of course, we're seeing job increases in the wholesale and retail trade. Of course, we're seeing jobs increase in transportation and warehousing. The two industries that are very closely correlated around Black Friday deals, Christmas shopping, and so on. People buy on Amazon, people buy Best Buy, Walmart, what have you, and they have things shipped. And we see that the likes of UPS and FedEx, who increase their employment of part-time package handlers, part-time drivers who don't even drive the trucks of the company. They actually have to drive their own vehicles, and they get reimbursed for the miles they put on it. These are the part-time jobs that are fueling this thing pushing forward because we're seeing a shift in the season and consumer habits. Let's see what those job numbers are saying in January, February, and we'll see the reality of what we're actually faced with. The heartbreaking part is this, though. The proportion of core-aged Canadians living in a household experiencing difficulties meeting its financial needs differed notably depending on household composition. For example, the proportion among couples with children, 32.4% in October, was higher than among couples without children, 25.3%. Among core-aged single parents, the figure rose to 46.8%, folks. So a third of parents can't afford the basic necessities for their kids or themselves. And then close to half of single parents can't afford the necessities for themselves or their kids. But I was told that these liberal handouts are fixing all these issues. I was told that these programs are there to help those in need. Then why are those in need increasing by the day? It's heartbreaking. We added 67,000 jobs to the economy. Yet a third of our parents are struggling incredibly. And almost half of our single parents can't afford the basic necessities. Yet you're going to turn around and tell me that Budget 2025 is the best thing since sliced bread. You're going to sit there on CTV with Vashti Capellas, try to gaslight her and the rest of Canada that this is the best thing and most generational investment we've ever seen. The likes of Desjardins and BMO turn around and say, don't tell us we're stupid. Nothing's changed. We're not doing anything different. What are we doing here? Because we're building Canada homes, we're building Canada strong. Yet construction fell last place in terms of jobs lost in the sector. 15,000 construction jobs gone. Yes, we can chalk those up to it's the time of year. Construction season's winding down. We're just going to see job losses in construction. But if you go on CTV and you go on CBC and you go on the mainstream and tell Canadians that you're building faster, you're building stronger, you're building Canada strong, baby, and we're seeing a significant regression in construction jobs, how are we to believe you that that's actually happening? Give me a break. And I appreciate Andrew Scheer crystallizing all this in a YouTube video where he lays out what people are actually feeling, what people are actually struggling with. They're not struggling with Polyev and drama in Ottawa. They're not struggling with what the Liberals said, what this MP said. They're not struggling with drama between interviewers and media members. They're not struggling with that. No, they're struggling with being able to feed themselves, as we saw in this data. And Scheer makes sure to bring it and focus it yet again in at least a way that lends a voice to what people are feeling, but with some comedic flair to it.
I finally found it. It took a while, but it's in there. This week was budget week, and millions of Canadians suffering under the cost of living crisis. All those people who are lined up for food banks because they can't afford the price of food were desperately hoping that there would be something in Mark Carney's first budget to bring down prices. And at first, it didn't look good, but I found it. It's on page 220. There is something in there for you to bring prices down if you're in the market for a private jet or luxury yacht. Budget 2025 announces the government's intention to end the luxury tax on aircraft and vessels. You know, I want to know how this happened. How does Mark Carney look at the landscape in Canada, see all those people lining up at food banks, the young people moving back into their parents' basement because they can't afford housing, and arrive at this? When I talk to my friends and neighbors, they're looking for ways to bring down their grocery bills. They're literally cutting out beef and all the extras just to make ends meet. When Mark Carney goes around the room at the country club and says, "What are you guys feeling the pinch on?" Carney, old bean, if you want to really help lower the cost of things, how about that luxury tax on private jets and yachts? The last time I bought a Gulfstream, I had to pay millions. We were all elbows up for you, so it's time you did something for us. What's crazy about that is that when someone pitched that idea, Carney said, "He's right, you know." And now
You spot on. This was a good video. I have to clip around a bunch of it because there's a bunch of music that YouTube doesn't like too much. But this is the focus we want to see. People want to figure out how to afford their lives, how to be able to feed their families, and have better quality of life. That's all people want. It's not going to come through government programs or handouts. Those things are important to deal with those who are in the low income brackets of our society. In a normal economy, though, that number should be fairly small. But as that number keeps increasing and increasing and increasing under this liberal government, it simply isn't sustainable. And we need to restore an economy where people can afford their lives so that we can help those who need help and be able to keep our country afloat in the process. But anyways, enjoy your day. Have yourselves a good one. I'm out.